All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back from spring break. I'm excited to get our video lectures started. I say video lectures, but what they really are is we're going to walk through the PowerPoints. You'll have my voice like this. You'll still get my terrible drawings, hopefully, and we'll see how it all goes. So, what should this look like? Well, it should be just like our class, where we lecture a bit, uh, and then you break up into groups and you work on practice problems. However, what's going to be different is obviously it's not a live session. I'll walk you through the slides, I'll communicate as well as I can, and then we'll get to the point in class where you guys would normally break up into groups and work with each other on a practice problem. But instead, the lecture will stop there and you guys can go work on your own on the practice problem. Similar to class, that I will post after the lecture or in conjunction with this, I will post the slides that have the solutions to the practice problems. So really it should be working through class very similarly to we always did, or we have in the past. Um, it will not be perfect. That is a lie. Why it won't be perfect? Well, we're all working from home, and this is probably the third time I've started this lecture, and I found out that Gus likes to join. So that sound you just heard, you're definitely going to hear that periodically throughout the lecture series, and I apologize, but he's a very anxious dog, and he loves to participate. Also, I'm gonna mess things up. Throughout the lecture, you'll see me do things like this, where I turn on the pen and I try to draw, and then I try to turn off the pen. But like that, I've found that I often switch and I mess things up a bit. So bear with me. Hopefully, as we go, we'll all get better and better at this. So let's start on lecture one. So like I said, we're going to take every day and we'll break it into small videos that each one will stop when we get to a practice problem. So today is all about the budget. We will start by looking at kind of an overview of the budget and then get into the sales budget. And at that point, we'll break, you'll have a little practice problem, and we'll go to the second of four lectures on budget. So let's dive into today's. So the purpose of the budgeting system. Well, there's a lot of purposes to budgeting. We have planning, evaluating performance, and providing incentives. So this means we're going to set a budget, and if a manager, say, beats the budget, they have a higher net income than they budgeted for, well, we can evaluate them. We can say, oh, you outperformed expectations and you received some bonus. Then we have facilitating communication and coordination. Well, that makes sense that we need to budget. Say we have multiple divisions and we need to figure out which division needs more resources or how those divisions are going to interact. Next is managing financial and operating performance. Like we saw previously in other classes, really our end goal is to have really strong financial statements. So what we need to do is we need to budget in a way that allows us to come to financial statements that are exactly what we wanted or needed. So we have at the beginning of the year the opportunity to set our budget and figure the problems out. So the end of the year we should get the financial performance and operating performance that we were trying for. And all of this together is all about allocating resources, right? We plan because we want to know how to allocate our resources through the year. We set performance metrics and provide incentives so resources are allocated correctly. So just know that there's a lot of aspects to the budget, a lot of reasons we do it, but overall, the main reason is it informs how we're going to allocate resources for the year. And today we're really going to talk about this planning phase. We're going to show how we plan for the year by starting at the top of our budget and just step by step throughout the entire budget. So we know what a budget is. It's basically straightforward. It's the plan for the period, right? Usually it's budgeted for year or month, so it's just our plan for this period. And again, it's something that people can look at throughout the year to help them make decisions that, hey, should I put our resources in product A or product B? Well, let's go to the budget. The budget says we need more sales of product B, so let's increase our marketing for product B. Right? So we know exactly what a budget is because we kind of do this every day. Right? We have our time budgets. As classes ramp up, you're trying to decide what to study. A lot of you might actually write down A325, A311, and you allocate a certain amount of time to homework and studying, getting prepared for those tests. Time budgets, they get more and more valuable as you get busy. And then we have our cash budgets. Hopefully, some of you guys do this where you kind of know every year this is how much money I have, or maybe every month this is how much money I have, this is what my rent is, my credit card bills, and you budget out for the month. So basically, it's the exact same thing for a company, just on a much grander scale. So, elements of the budget, high level, we have the operational projections. So this is the sales for the years, all our costs to produce our products, the equipment we have to buy. Then we have our financial projections. This is the financial statements that are going to result of our operations. So just like everything else, the end goal for the operations is to have strong financials. Then we have our cash flow. Just like it says, it's the inflows and outflows and the cash balances at each point of the year. And then we have our performance standards. We'll get more of this later, but really these are just how we're going to measure the performance of our firm. Do we want a very high ROI? Do we want to focus on net incomes, our contribution margin? The budget allows us to set those standards. So we say we need an ROI of 10%. So we're going to create our budget in a way that ends up with an ROI of what we want. If we do the budget and the ROI is only 8%, then we say, okay, go back. What can we change? Do we need to increase our marketing to try to sell more? Do we need to work on cutting costs? How do we get those performance standards to what we want? So all this is very circular, right? You do your operations to create your cash flow or your financial statements. Then you do your performance standards. If it doesn't work, you go back to operations until all in all your budget works out. So there's two main ways that we go about, or a firm goes about creating a budget. The first way is the top-down approach. So this is where senior managers distribute a set of goals all the way down to the lower people in the firm. And so again, top-down means it starts at the top. Say the executive suite, they come up with what they think the firm should look like at the end of the year, the whole budget, and they allocate it down to all the employees of the firm. The opposite is a bottom up, or also called a zero base approach. And this is where the managers of the firm, not the executives, just the normal managers and the accountants, they look at each individual division, say, of the firm, and they combine all that information from the bottom all the way up, and then they deliver the plan to the executives. So let's visually kind of see what this looks like. So we have our executives, and say each of the executives, there's two main divisions, division 1, division 2. And then each one of those divisions has 3 product lines, P1, P2, P3, P1, P2, product 3. And so the top-down approach would say the executives think they know best. So they say, okay, we think Division 1 can make $1 million, Division 2 can make $2 million, and this is how each product should perform. So executives tell the divisions what they're going to get, how they should perform, and they tell how each product should work out for the year. So they kind of create a budget for each product that way. The opposite is the bottom-up approach. And so what this does is it starts way down here at the product levels, and it says, hey, manager for product 1 in division 1, how do you think your division is going to perform this year? You create a budget for your own product. Then they go to manager of product 2 for division 1, and they say the same thing. You create a budget for your single product. And they do that for all the products. Then these managers of each product line, they report up to their division managers. The division managers compile everything into one budget for their division. Then each division does that, and then they report up to the executives, and the executives compile the division budgets into one big master budget. So that's how it works. The top down starts with the executives. They implement the budget and they pass it down to everybody else. The bottom up starts at the bottom. Each manager does their own budget for their using their own knowledge for their product, and it gets compiled and works its way all the way back up to the executives. So there's pros and cons of each approach. So the bottom up approach, this is good because local employees have the most accurate knowledge, right? If you're the executive and you work out of New York and you have a product line that's in Denver, if you try to budget for that Denver product line, you might miss a lot of local knowledge things. You might not realize how the market is in Denver, how they're taking to your product. But by giving those managers the decision rights to create their own budget, you're really taking advantage of all the knowledge that that local manager has. The bad part is, if you allow that local manager to set the budget, they may build some slack in there, right? If the manager gets a bonus for hitting the budgeted net income mark, well, if that manager thinks they can make $1 million in net income this year, they have an incentive to build in and say, oh, the budget, we think we're only going to make 500,000, right? Because that way that manager knows that they can really hit 1 million if they put 500,000 in the budget, that they'll definitely hit 1 million and receive their incentive. So that's budgetary slack, where they add in a little slack, a cushion that only they know about, right? Because you're relying on local managers to set the budget, so they're the only one that knows about that slack. So top-down approach, kind of the opposite. The pro is you can reduce that slack. The executives can use their best judgment and tell that manager in Denver, hey, we think you can hit $1 million. That's what you'll be incentivized on. And then so the manager has no ability to build in slack. The bad part is, what if you tell them, hey, you can hit $1 million, and they actually know from local knowledge that they could hit $2 million. So they're fine with that. You're going to end up allocating too much or too few resources to that manager, or vice versa. You might say they're going to hit $1 million, but that manager in Denver knows that there's no way they can hit $1 million. And so you're not giving them enough resources to hit their metric. So there's pros and cons of each. And usually in practice today, it's not one or the other. Usually it's kind of an iterative process. Most firms these days, I believe the larger firms do some sort of bottom-up approach where the divisions will create a budget and report up to the executives. But then the executives will look at it and they might make changes or ask questions to the local managers, and they'll update the budget accordingly. So it's kind of a iterative approach between the local managers and the executives. So what do these budgets actually look like? Well, it's pretty much what you think. It creates the financial statements. So we start here with revenues. We make our revenue budget, and we know, okay, if we want to make X number of sales, we need to produce X number of products. Those products are going to cost us a certain amount of money. So we build in our budget for materials, labor, and overhead. That's going to result in our cost of goods sold. We have all our operating expenses that will usually be based on revenues, right? If our revenues are going to be 10% greater than last year, well, our operating expenses will probably be 10% greater than last year. That will result in our budgeted income statement, and that will flow through not necessarily to the budgeted balance sheet, but just to the budgeted financial statements overall. So this right here, the operating budget, is the real big potato. It's the big one that we have to work on. And all that will flow through, and the outcome of that usually is 90% of the inputs for the financial statements. So as we see, we said we start over here with revenues. Well, that's because it's the cornerstone of the budget, right? We start with revenues because everything flows off of that, right? Knowing how many products we're going to sell influences how much we're going to produce, influences our total cost, influences our net income, and then that influences our financial statements. So the sales budget has two primary components: volume and price. So these can be projected in a lot of ways, but it's not necessarily a very easy process, right? There's a lot of major factors and minor ones, but let's go over some of the major ones that you'd have to think about. Past sales levels and trends. Obviously, if one of the first starting points of any budget for revenues is going to be last year's. If we sold 1 million units last year, we'll say, okay, we estimate we're going to sell 1 million units, but then let's tweak off of that. If the economic trend is going down, well, maybe we're not going to sell 1 million, maybe we'll sell 900,000. If the industry is going down, similarly, maybe we're going to sell a little less. Um, Other expected factors, that's kind of a lame one. Obviously, if there's other factors, we'll consider it. Political or legal events. This is a big one that we've learned before, if you're going to up your price, well, demand's going to go down a little bit. So we'll have to forecast a lower sales volume and an increased sales price. If we've done a $20 billion advertising campaign, well, hopefully that means we can increase our sales a little bit from last year. Actions of competitors, new products, market research, right? In general, this is just to show that there's a lot of things that we need to look at. We'll generally start with this past sales level, and all the other things will just influence how far we move off of that last year's sales level. So we've got to our first problem. In this problem, and throughout most of the problems in the rest of the lecture, we'll look at Beats audio, right? Beats headphones, and we're going to do the budgets for Beats. So work on this first one. It's the sales budget. And basically, you're just coming up with projected sales for each of the products. So work through that, and the answers to this will be posted online. So next lecture, so far we've just now hit the tip of the iceberg. We've went an overview of the budget and we've estimated the sales budget. In the next lecture, we'll continue moving down the budget and focus on the cost of productions and how to get to the cost of finished goods inventory.